Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and hey, we got a week with new Beyonce songs. If only that was the only thing that was happening. And it's Billboard Breakdown. There are some weeks where this job is manageable or fun. This is probably not going to be one of them. Hell, I could have just had my hands full with just Beyonce releasing a pair of country songs or Noah Kahan seeing more persistent success. But let's be real, that's not why the majority of you are peeking in. No, for those of you who saw my video around Kanye West, Ty Dolla $ign, and Vultures on my main channel, you're probably wondering how on earth I choose to cover it here. If you haven't seen that video, link over there. It's only a minute long on my main channel. I highly recommend you check it out because it's going to provide some illustrative context to what's gonna happen next. Specifically, I also want y'all to take a look at the comments section as well because it sure ain't pretty. It's probably not gonna be pretty down there either, a warning in advance to be civil. Because at this point, I think a larger reasoned exploration of that response it's long overdue. That Usher have been the album bomb that we would have got, but no. And you know what, for a change of pace, let me go back to my old album bomb rules for Vulture, where if you got more than 8 songs debuting, I only talk about those in the top 40, so to speak. So outside of that, we have Do It at 52, Paid at 53, Keys to My Life at 55, Paperwork at 64, Big Forgiveness at 65, Hood Rat at 67, Problematic at 79, Good Don't Die at 93, and King at 94. So, with that thankfully easing some workload here, believe me, I got a reason why I'm doing it, we have a ways to go before we get to Kanye proper. Let's start off with number 39. Actually, no, stop right there. Because as I said in my video last week, hope you went to check it out, I'm not reviewing Kanye West. Or Vultures. I haven't heard the album. I have no incentive to do so. Hell, I haven't properly reviewed a Kanye album since 2018, and I arguably should not have done that with Ye, given everything I've learned about those Wyoming sessions behind the scenes. You know, the album that he wanted to call Hitler at the time. But I was more forgiving for Jesus is King and Donda when they had their album bombs in 2019 and 2021. But there are consequences for crossing certain lines. And he has not earned the benefit of my good faith on my channels, on my platform. And thus what I'm going to do instead are the other entries for where I normally talk about a Kanye West, Ty Dolla $ign song. I'm going to examine not just the backlash that I've received, but the context behind very specific arguments because I find the mindset revealing. But before we get into all that, number 34. Let's start with the critique. Who are you? Well, this is easily the most common remark thrown at me off of my video, and well, I could say hyperliteral and be, hey, my name is Mark Grondin. I'm the host of Spectrum Pulse and Billboard Breakdown, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture, where I've been discussing music since some of y'all were in kindergarten, if not younger, and hell, that's just very possible. Given my oldest public writings on Kanye go back to 2010, that's not what that comment is about. No. I expected it as soon as my video caught escape velocity, broke outside of my own audience and algorithm bubble, and impacted a larger public that's probably never seen those reviews, or me. And that's understandable, especially given all the blunt language I used. If all you're used to is praise, that video might shock you. But these fandoms are not all stupid. The underlying question of who are you? Who are you to be saying this about him? We've placed him on a pedestal. You're not a fan. How dare you impugn his reputation? To him, it's about power. Who is allowed to question him? Because the more questions and critique that he faces, and by extension them, the more fragile their idol might become. And that naturally takes us to number 33. It's not that deep. So I think this is the first deflection that's actually worth caring about because immediately it is a contradiction. You praise the absolute hell out of Kanye as a genius and an icon, but it's also totally not that deep, just entertainment. Don't you dare look behind that curtain. Now, there is a whole subset of casual listeners who don't really care about anything beyond new Kanye album. Probably sounds good. I'll give it a shot. Of which I think there is a responsibility for me as a critic to hope that they try to think a little bit more deeply about what they choose to consume and its content. But they also don't care enough to make an argument in my comments section. This is for the stands that do. And they want to brush aside any critique of what Kanye West says and does and platforms, because if they think a little bit more deeply about it, they might be forced to confront something that they don't like. and that reflects upon them, something within themselves they don't like. They had an emotional response to art. That emotion matters to them. By reapproaching that art with new information, the emotional response might change. Hell, I might as well include the line of "he's trolling," which at this point I'll reiterate my common stance. What a lot of folks say ironically to get a rise out of folks, they ultimately believe unironically. It comes out in the cards, and the money spent counts the same either way. Of course, we can't forget the folks who use the argument disingenuously, who absolutely know this shit with Kanye does run deeper, and this argument is just built to waste my time. As well as, number 30, separate the art from the artist. You know, I gotta wonder if left-leaning postmodern philosophers Roland Barthes and Michel Foucault ever truly deeply considered the nightmare that would come for so many consumers bastardizing death of the author and what is an author in order to justify their consumption. I mean, that's a limit that can come up with postmodern philosophy in terms of impacting real material conditions, especially when your personal deconstruction gets commodified. I mean, look what happened with punk. It's a big reason why there's a lot of tension between postmodern and socialist. But that's the thing, the majority of people don't recognize what I'm talking about. They neither know nor care about that distinction in theory. This is in a classroom with academic rigors and assumptions of good faith critique. So conversations of separating the art from the artist in this setting on YouTube, they take a different meaning. They want to be absolved of any sense of moral guilt for continuing to buy or stream or enjoy art made by bad people, so they don't have to think about the consequences of doing so. It becomes a plea for ignorance. But again, note the contradiction. As a critic and an expert with a platform, there is an expectation for depth and rigor for which I strive to uphold, and that includes the necessary context of an artist's impact on the work, up until I don't validate your opinion of that artist, where the separation between art and artist is then demanded. I mean, I could then highlight that a deeper examination of Kanye West art going back decades now often betrays exactly what he believes, or that in a performance medium, the artist's personal method can be intrinsic for the understanding or appreciation of a work, or, and this is a loaded one, that by accepting the artist's deep flaws in connection with the works themselves and examining your emotional response to them, that added context, you might face some tangible introspection, challenges you on what you believe. But you know, I did an entire video essay on this 3 years ago, examining it in detail. Please go watch it. In reality, again, it's a plea for ignorance, that I shut up if I know what's good for me. So before we get to the impact of all of that, number 26, how you use your platform. So this is an argument I have seen from two sides. The "if you don't have something nice to say, don't say not anything at all," that's often made by liberals who care more about manners and constraints of discourse rather than what's actually being fucking said. A very dangerous path to normalization and giving Kanye West credit that he does not deserve based on, well, he's rich, he has a platform, surely he knows what he's talking about, when he very clearly doesn't. And by those who recognize that by me speaking on this at all, I'm potentially exposing more folks to bad ideas. Don't give it oxygen, put it out of your mind. I'm going to focus on the latter group because there is some merit to that argument. After all, I don't cover National Socialist black metal for that exact reason. But this is where the nuances of platforms and power dynamics matter. NSBM is an ugly niche subgenre populated by the absolute dregs of the scene. That music is intentionally ugly. It'll likely never impact the Billboard charts. Woe betide us if it does. An album of Vultures' size and magnitude, it's different. It's a no-win scenario. If I choose to cover it regularly, it's a normalizing cover for what's being said and what it represents, no matter how much I might tear into it. If I ignore it entirely, I get spammed with comments asking for me to cover it. And more importantly, I cede my voice and platform to the reckless media environment that will only give it more coverage and way more praise. So with the power and platform that y'all have given me, the moral imperative is for me to speak out, poison the toxic positivity, and then take the backlash. And I'm pretty consistent in that too. And there's nuance in the edge cases. I don't cover NSBM. I never have. Yes, I reviewed Try That in a Small Town by Jason Aldean on Billboard Breakdown and my worst list of 2023 for being white nationalist and reactionary, but it was done in the context of someone who has roots in country as a subgenre and the expertise and knowledge to excise the grift effectively rather than the whole shallow liberal pile-on. It's why I cover all those painfully cringy white nationalist dipshit rappers when they chart for 1 week on Billboard Breakdown before getting tossed aside. There is a knowledge of their disposability variability, the constructed nature of the Hot 100 charts, and by extension, this show tends to act as a broad-based equalizer and normalizer, for better and for worse. But I don't review their albums. I didn't review the Jason Aldean album that had Try That in a Small Town on it, because I knew it would tank. I was right. And it goes on from there. I've never reviewed a full 6ix9ine album. When the allegations came out around Melanie Martinez, I stopped covering her, and I never will. My one review of XXXTentacion was more a deconstruction of his fandom than a proper review. Hell, that is how I've approached Kanye West album reviews since 2019. Hell, I will give you 2 examples now that you might not know about. The first being that I don't think I will ever cover another Sia album, given what happened with Music, the movie. There are some things, personally, that I consider beyond the pale. Here's another. I've never covered a modern Nas album, because I believe the allegations from Khalees. Am I perfect here? God, no. I probably should never have covered Marilyn Manson in 2017, especially when that album sucked. I definitely should not have covered R. Kelly's album in 2013, or Chris Brown's projects in 2014 or 2015, but I'm also willing to give myself a little bit of grace in mixed to outright negative discussions of art in my first couple years on YouTube, rather than a grown-ass man in his mid-40s spewing hate and misinformation to a much larger audience. Which naturally takes us to number 23. Whataboutism. This is where you're going to get a bunch of liberal arguments of hypocrisy from people, where, oh, you're going to review these rappers who kill people in gangs, but not Kanye spewing misogyny and anti-Semitism and all manner of conspiratorial nonsense. And this argument flat out sucks, just because it relies on the shallowest of equivocations and more sustained ignorance from those people. It requires them to not know about all the times I bring up gang violence when the songs chart on Billboard Breakdown or in the album reviews, where there is a systemic complexity in examining artistic response, and a very difficult conversation that I'm willing to try to have. But those making this argument, they deliberately do not want to have that conversation about what Kanye has said and done. So if I choose to honor the equivalency that they have made in order to make the review and necessarily bring all that up, as I've consistently done, why then would you want me to stop talking? And this is where we have to bring up degree and proportionality. I mean, the vast majority of the critique of music is subjective, inconsistent to time and place and critic and system of morality. And there are absolutely shades of gray in all of this. Hell, I can bring up more that you probably haven't even considered in this conversation, like how Kanye West is well known in the industry for using ghostwriters and ghost producers, to say nothing of all of his collaborating producers and writers over the years. So how much of this moral impetus falls on him? The point here is that there's a spectrum of discussing this, and by necessity, there's gonna be complexity and nuance. But when you combine Kanye's power and his reach and his fame and his influence, you run into an outlier. A position where extenuating circumstances, given that he is a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire, are in play. And another contradiction the stands have to hold on to. If he's on the pedestal, should he not be judged more harshly in the usage of his power, given its impact? Or because of his power, is he then granted a larger pass? I mean, I thought with great power comes great responsibility. This is all combined with the reality that Kanye isn't even playing by the rules of his own game and industry in terms of sample clearance. It's why the albums keep getting pulled off of streaming time and time again. And the expectation that he should just be given a free pass, when I know for a fact that such a pass would never be extended to the legends of rap that these stands don't even recognize, who are far more exploited by the industry and fucked up sampling laws than Kanye ever was. But the reality here is that so much of this is tied into prosperity gospel rhetoric, where righteousness compounds, but a single sin on your soul weighs the same regardless of what it is. In good faith, it's the root of all of this whataboutism, and the free pass given to anyone looking to express their values by consuming music. Because under late capitalism, that's where the value is apparently only identified. And that takes us to number 3. Why even bother? So I know there's a lot of folks who have chosen to say nothing rather than engage with this at all, too much of a hassle and a headache. And believe me, I get it. If you don't have a larger platform to potentially affect change, I get it even more. This is also where you're going to encounter folks who say I'm doing this for clout or for money, as if the grand total of $2 I got from that short was some sort of massive boon. And if I was really cynically doing all that, I would have made plenty of long-form reviews exposing a bunch of those acts I previously mentioned at length alongside their albums, and I would have made bank doing so, alongside probably cultivating an audience that I could not stand, who expect me to do those dunks. I'd rather not. So yes, I consider this an extreme situation. I have taken rare measures to accommodate it. And I'm not going to be bothering with those 2 planned sequel albums that I doubt are even going to get released. I'm saying my piece now. I'm moving on. Frankly, I would just be repeating myself. Because there is a difference between measured considerations of how one uses a platform, acknowledging when someone gets it wrong or right, past and future, versus going off the deep end and never admitting fault or fallibility, and every contradiction that defies reason that the fan base has argued in order to maintain the power. Because the reality here is, it is about power, and a fan base that would rather worship it than question its usage. And that makes sense. Fascism, after all, is inherently contradictory. It's not supposed to make sense. Relying way more on nostalgic aesthetics of strength rather than the fragile reality, where tangible success is subsumed under petty grievances and bitter grudges, a war that can never be won, where the vendettas run more on emotionality than logic because words don't stop boots or bullets. And art at its core is a conversation. It runs on emotionality. It might even make these sentiments tantalizing, especially if you don't think about it. Heighten the phantasms of those who have bought in. And at this scale, if y'all have granted me a platform, I've got a responsibility to handle this properly. Not by granting my platform to his ideas, but describing their reality from exterior, and then why folks defend it, so you can recognize it too. And truth be told, I've seen worse backlashes. Look at the summer of 2021 for a very memorable and stupid example. But when I see the rhetoric of being used around this album, where if it came from anyone else, it would not be getting anywhere near the defenses, and y'all know that, it only further belies me taking exceptional measures here. It's got me concerned on a deeper level. But hey, you know what? I think it concerns y'all too. You know. After all, you might call this grandstanding or virtue signaling, and if facts aren't caring about your feelings, especially when the evidence is plain as day what he's said and done, why are you so angry I'm pointing it out? Because truth be told, I think I gave y'all way more grace than you probably deserved or will return to me. Think on that. Worst of the week, dishonorable mention. Let's be real here. It would have been something from Vultures, probably through a combination of bad Kanye West bars and worse production that would have pissed me off. But again, I have not heard the album. So I'm going to leave it up to all y'all unfortunate souls who actually heard the damn thing to pick out what you think my worst of the week would have been. Leave suggestions in the comments. They would be a nice distraction from the hellscape of discourse I probably unleashed.